Good evening, visitors, and welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Dan Hiscock, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Chief Petty Officer Stuart Strachan. This evening we warmly welcome the family of Private James Richard Holloway, whose story will be told shortly. As always, we welcome the veterans who have served, those still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome those members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by family and visitors to the memorial. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem. If you wish to and you're able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we will read just one of the stories behind those listed on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament. Flowers of the forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Private James Richard Holloway. James Holloway was born on the 20th of September 1894 in Barnawartha, Victoria. Known as Jim, he was the youngest of 12 children, born to Frank and Hannah Holloway. He received his education at Barnawartha State School and later took up employment in the state coal mines in Wonthaggi. He was working there as a miner at the outbreak of the war in 1914. Jim Holloway enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force on the 14th of January 1915. He was assigned to the 5th Reinforcements of the 14th Battalion. In March, he was joined by his brother Frank, who had also enlisted and was assigned to the same battalion. After a short period of training in Australia, the brothers embarked from Melbourne on board the troop ship Hororata on the 17th of April 1915. Jim and Frank arrived on the Gallipoli Peninsula in June after spending a short period training in Egypt. The first months of Jim's service was spent establishing and defending the Anzac front line after the development of a stalemate. Time was spent training, digging communication trenches and saps, as well as undertaking general defensive improvements. Conditions in the front line were harsh and were characterized by rats, flies, dust, and heat. On the 7th of August, Holloway's unit was given orders for an attack on Abd el-Rahman Spur and Hill 971 as part of a series of attacks due to take place along the peninsula. The following day, the men attacked enemy lines in the early hours of the morning. Advancing under heavy rifle and machine gun fire, the 15th Battalion on their flanks suffered heavy casualties. As Holloway's unit pushed the enemy back, the Turks counter-attacked their left flank, causing the battalion to split up. Confused and disorientated, the troops were given orders to dig in and consolidate their position. As they did so, the enemy began to shell their lines, causing mass casualties amongst the men who had little cover. Private Jim Holloway was wounded in action. Shortly after, his brother Frank was hit. Frank eventually recovered from his wounds and returned to active service. Jim, however, was missing in action. His family became increasingly anxious about his fate, having not heard from him for almost a year. His sister pleaded with the Melbourne-based records, "The uncertainty is worse than anything, and we would be so thankful if something definite could be found out." His father wrote, "I have not had any communication from him for nearly 12 months. An answer will greatly oblige his poor old father." Jim's case was complicated by the fact that his pay continued to be drawn for several months after he was wounded at Gallipoli. His family had received conflicting reports from his comrades and army officials who said he recovered from his wounds and had been returned to duty. However, letters to Jim were returned to the family marked unable to trace. By 1917, there was still no word from Jim, who had kept in touch with his family before being wounded. A court of inquiry was held at Rouen in France in September that year. One of his comrades stated, "I was with Holloway when he was shot before Hill 971 on the 8th of August 1915. The bullet went in near his shoulder and out of his back. There was a terrible wound near his backbone. Another man and I carried him in after the charge to the point where the stretcher bearers were operating and left him there. I do not know anything further about him." Another stated, "Jim Holloway was wounded and I saw him at the first dressing station on Sunday the 8th of August. He was badly wounded in the chest and bleeding heavily. I never heard from him again." The court of inquiry later determined that Jim was killed in action during the advance on Abd el-Rahman Spur on the 8th of August 1915. His body was never located. Private Jim Holloway was 21 years old. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, amongst almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private James Richard Holloway, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please be upstanding for the reading of the ode and sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We'll leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub of Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they'll be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support of the Memorials Development Project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.